So hello, Jonathan Moore here, CEO and co-founder of Neuroflash. Myself, a little bit of the frustrated academic type. So I've done my PhD in cognitive neuropsychology, and I founded a couple of startups with Neuroflash, my big baby right now, looking at big data and neuromarketing. Well, you'll hear more about that soon, but definitely a lot less frustrated nowadays, given that we have so much data, as we have just also heard from the colleagues from Kantar there, so much data to look at and to draw very interesting conclusions about. So excited to be here and looking forward to the talk.
Great, I think we can move on. My name is Michael Szaniecki. I'm a managing director currently for 2 brands at Volkswagen Group. And the story that we're going to tell to you today is about actually the Volkswagen, where I was at that time marketing director for the brand. And we think that the story is very, very up to date for the circumstances that we are now experiencing.
Very good. So I think you can see my screen. Seth, can you confirm?
Yes, you just want to go into presentation mode.
There we go.
That's good.
Fantastic. Yeah, so the story today will be about overwhelming complexity, like a network like this, looking at thousands, millions of associations that consumers have, and to derive from that more simplicity. For example, a concrete campaign, just like these two, that are also able to deliver success. So more engagement on social channels, more brand consideration. And I think it's quite pertinent to the current situation because, as we'll talk about, the Volkswagen brand had quite a crisis to deal with, but there's obviously a current crisis going on in which the appropriate associations, so what really connects with consumers, is vitally important.
Right, we are starting our journey, our story from 2016, when some of my colleagues from Wolfsburg decided to ruin the image of the Volkswagen brand by the Dieselgate, of course. And then with the chaos and the mandate that we received from the headquarters to work on our own positioning and our own response to the situation, we liaised with Jonathan for the completely new approach how to handle with the probably one of the most dramatic crises that the brand has ever experienced. Although now, with this crisis that we are having now, this is even more, I would say, critical to understand the story as an approach that we took with Volkswagen. Having this mandate to locally work on the positionings, we depicted 2 positioning routes that we wanted to follow. One was a Volkswagen as your sidekick. The other was Volkswagen that is a brand making you feel good. And both of them were responsible for answering to the 6 dimensions, 6 equities of the brand that we wanted to rebuild, like trust, responsibility, and reliability, or build on top, which is affordability and innovativeness. With the methodology that we took with Jonathan, which is not going to consumers for the laboratory conditions, asking them during focus group discussions, what do you think about these 2 routes? We basically, thanks to Jonathan's approach and the engine he provides, we ask the entire population what they think, these associations, these concepts, how they work with the brand under the circumstances of the Dieselgate. And this is how we got our answer from the entire population. And on the next slide, you will see also how this methodology is also making you a humble person and a humble agency and a humble, basically, agent and player of this market. Having the feel-good route as a positioning route for the Volkswagen, I was very excited. And as a marketing director for the brand, I said, okay, I have this fixation on the celebration. Let's be festive, let's be happy, and let's build our total idea and brand narrative and copy and customer experiences around the word and called celebration. What I didn't understand, or what I had in mind, was this very much the origins coming from US, but the market that I was responsible for, celebration association, was very much going into the direction of liturgy and church. So unwittingly, I wanted to push the brand in the direction that I really didn't want. Jonathan, over to you.
So this is part of the data output. What you see here is everything translated in the original version. It was, of course, the here on the right side, it was all in Polish. You can see the seed word in the middle And what we compute is the strength of association, which gets a word closer to the center. We also take into account the prevalence, so the frequency in which this word occurs in the culture. So based on billions of words, but more about the technology later on. What you can see here is on the right side, how strongly things are connected with liturgy, and they're actually getting more blue. And you can see that that is quite strong in the Polish version, meaning that indeed Polish consumers, when confronted with the concept of celebration, they quickly have associations having to do with church and liturgy, and that may be intended, but in this case it was not intended, and may have prevented indeed the step in the wrong brand direction. So the question comes, going back to the initial challenge, how can you translate something like feel good and all of the accompanying associations in a positive way, but in a way that people can actually see and understand? When you have like a campaign, you're going to have something to depict your associations. You're going to have a character, you're going to have words, you're going to have a background, topic, story. And using this approach, we looked at thousands of these different characters and rated them according to their likelihood of invoking these brand relevant associations. So how strong is a teacher or a doctor, or in this case, a robot or a dog, able to instill in people the connection with innovation, being valuable, etc. So you can see here that on many dimensions, the teacher and the doctor are quite able to be automatically connected to these associations. So a consumer seeing a teacher will find it more easy to think about things like innovation, obviously due to education. And with a doctor, you have the responsibility and the trustworthiness associations. So here it's the translation of what associations you want to achieve, but using a vehicle with something that you can actually display. Now you have a character, or you have a selection of possible characters that you want to also put in a situation or a topic frame. And here, of course, it's similar. We can look at all these different topics and look at things like being an ally, being in an alliance, or being supportive, topics that have high relevance to the intended brand associations. So if you have your character, you can now put him in one of those associative frames.
Which made this extremely easy for us to understand what kind of brand narrative and brand customer experiences we want to shape and design. And this is just one example. This is a CSR program with little heroes, little superheroes, that was about giving the skill of first aid to kids in the very first stage of their lives, to shape their personality to become better people because of the skill of saving people's lives end of the day. And this customer experience delivered now to dozens of thousands of people, of children, and automatically also to their parents, proved to be much more powerful tool to convey and rebuild the image of the brand and actually sell cars end of the day than any other communication that we use beforehand featuring our cars. On the next slide, you can also see how simple the execution can be to make superheroes from the kids, also to deliver this customer experience. Whereas the story, what Jonathan just mentioned, of support, of a doctor as an archetype, as a character, can be provided in a very cost-effective way.
I want to interject here real quick, Michal, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Because I believe at this point, definitely human creativity came in, especially through you, Michal, and the agency. Because as you can see on the slide here with the green and red words, there are things that are obviously positive about all of this. For example, with a first aid campaign and the children helping out, etc. But you have these red things, accident, death, and CPR, which obviously will invoke very negative emotions. So this is, I think, an observation that still demanded a change in the approach in order to address it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And if I remember, it was then the idea to make the children superheroes,
instead of just
who cannot be harmed.
Exactly, instead of just going through the simple first aid CPR procedure. It was very much a Marvel story at the end of the day. On the next program was even more challenging, because at some point you have to tell what is your price. And in the automotive, the price, especially for Volkswagen, is nothing to brag about because it's high. So we wanted to use the total cost of owning a car, part of our brand story after the Dieselgate, but it's an extremely complicated and extremely boring story to tell. Again, using the methodology and the approach together with Jonathan, we understood how to simplify the message to the pieces and episodes that this message can be resonating the most. And just Jonathan will flip through some slides just to represent how simple the execution can be, building on the very simple insight of me as a person. I like to save my car even more so. The next execution would be, I lose nothing with age, my car also not much, talking about the residual value. I burn nothing on vacation, my car even less. So it's very, very simple episodal digital customer experiences that we use until today, for a couple of years now, until today, especially on the remote, currently remote online visual or video chats with our consumers. We use these executions exactly to explain the cost of owning a car much more effectively than ever before. Now, also, what is because we are telling the story which is now a couple of years through or in, because we started with the Dieselgate, but it never stopped. It helped us also today in the pandemic situation, in the very beginning of the coronavirus, to respond as a first brand in the market to the pandemic situation, to the circumstances that people were thinking about the cars as the last thing on their agendas probably. But we built Volkswagen e-home, physical but also online place where everything could happen for you if you wanted. And the narrative that we built was not apocalyptic, was not making people scared about their future. Just the opposite. We used the trust and the feel-good narration that we learned together with Jonathan to feed this program much more effectively than our competitive brands. And we were the first, because one dimension that I will be also sharing with you in a second is that the approach that we took and the methodology with Jonathan is extremely smooth, extremely fast, extremely real-time based. And especially when you have the crisis like this erupting overnight, you can react automatically tomorrow.
So when I look at these slides, it's always about the translation. So you've seen in the beginning translating into different characters and different topics, and you can then see how that baseline can help you to communicate something like responsibility with the campaign that you saw here with the first aid, the teacher and the doctor and the first aid combined. And here, of course, it's other associations, but it's likewise the same process of using the associations as the basis and then building on top. And the same, of course, goes on here, avoiding the everything is terrible crisis and the gloomy outlook, and seeing how you can build communication that instills trust and feel good in the consumers. So I want to give you a quick background now onto how this is done. So how do we get from something as complex as this to these very straightforward associations? And I'm delighted to actually do that live with you to really show how these associations work. So for that, everyone behind the computer, please close your eyes. Close them completely and don't look. I assume everyone has their eyes closed. Now, everyone with an even age, please open your eyes and read these words. And now close your eyes again, please. And now everyone with an uneven age, please open your eyes and read these words. And now close them again. And now everyone with an age, so everyone, please open your eyes and complete this English word in your head. Very good. Now, what I've done is I have given the people with an even age the words on the left and people with the uneven the words on the right. And very likely, it works about 80% of the time, the people with an even age have completed this word as soup, and the other half roughly has completed this as soap. What I've done here is I triggered, primed your thinking piece, your brain, with certain associations that make it more likely that another word will get active that is, of course, related to it, that is associated with it. And then presented with a cue, it will be easier for you to think of one or the other thing, depending on the priming that I've given you. And of course, in everything that we've discussed so far, that is exactly what we have done. We knew what associations we wanted people to have, just like I wanted you to think about soup or soap, but then we used these ideas, represented them as characters and as topics and as stories in order for you to automatically get that idea. That is, of course, what good marketing is all about. It's about using the associations that exist in a culture and use them in order to, well, I wouldn't say bend them to your will, but to position your message in a way that is optimally resonant. So that makes it very easy for people to get the right idea when they see the message. And it's about doing it for most people. If, for example, you saw the soup associated words and you thought about soap, well, that is totally plausible because maybe, I don't know, it's Corona and you think about washing your hands all the time and for a long time. So it doesn't work on everyone, but it works on most people most of the time. And that is the key here. And as mentioned, indeed, the output that is provided by this approach is you type in what you want people to think about, and then you get related things that lead people to think about it. And indeed, with such a, so here, for example, you see soup and you see everything related. This is exactly what you just saw on the slide. And this is obviously our online interface of the software. And the same goes then for a slogan, a tagline, or any type of content, which you can simply see A or B, which type of content is better able to instill one or the other idea in the consumer. And what we have done in the context of this case is that we actually expanded our understanding of doctor and teacher and found related associations like, for example, first aid. And then, and you can see it here on the right in the bar graph, we checked how strongly is first aid connected to our brand relevant associations, and we found very high overlap, meaning that indeed we should, for the hero campaign, use doctor, teacher, and also first aid in order to get our message across. And this is indeed what it resulted in. So the technology behind this is rather straightforward. If you know a lot about data science and you have access to, well, powerful machines. So you scrape digitally a lot of text data from a culture. So in this case, from Poland, amounting to at least 50 billion words. Then you use a technology called word embedding, which, well, is a way of representing this very large data set in a smaller form so that you can do computations on it. As a side effect, you can create these association networks. And the patterns of these words in relationship with each other are actually predictive of what type of activation appears in people's heads when they see certain words or concepts. And of course, you can then mold certain slogans, words, messages in order to have the expected activation, be it super soap or what makes people think about a responsible car company. So behind this data, and just this is just as an illustration, it's always the distance of associations. So for example, here we have two people and one is on the axis of clever, very high, and on the axis of old as well. So this guy has more clever and old associations, noble, moustache, and physicist, whereas this other person, he does not. He has these other associations, reckless, sunny boy, and DUI. Now, just from those associations, it is easy enough for people to think of indeed the person behind these associations, which is Albert Einstein and Justin Bieber. And why do these associations appear right there? Because it's the context in which people talk about these individuals which shapes the associations attached to them. So that's why we have associations of trustworthiness with the doctors, because in Poland, they are often discussed in that type of context. So indeed, for Volkswagen, we can do that also on the brand level, what is safe, what is modern. But in this case, it was about finding the right points in the network. So for example, the brand values, checking which character from all of these different nodes has the highest alignment, and then plotting them and using that as the creative foundation for the delivering on these campaigns.
And I cannot stress more how powerful these two programs were, thanks to the simple understanding of what we've got to do. And on the next slide, you will see that the engagement, the emotionality of these programs were, even on this total cost of ownership, were significantly higher than any other campaign that was actually about the launch of our sexy cars and sexy models. And on the next slide is just a summary of what it brought to the brand. Brand consideration improved significantly and over the record high numbers, and the equities also improved, and we collected numerous international awards for these two initiatives, including the EFI. What is also important, what I mentioned that I will tell you in a second about, is this is the short video that we're not gonna show today, but basically this is a DDB strategy, so a creative agency strategist, and she's telling us about how importantly and significantly the work with agencies, especially now in the pandemic on the remote level, improved thanks to this methodology. Basically what you can do is you can take your iPhone and you can, with the interface that Jonathan was providing to you, you can consult this technology everywhere you are in the world, basically working with the agency, and you have an objective answer to your question, to your creative question, to your customer experience question, to your DCJ question, whatever question about the, you know, how to respond to the circumstances or how to combine the concept with the brand is at your disposal, and exactly the colleague from DDB is explaining this exactly.
So to wrap up, what we aim to show you here is that using big data, you can, and the methodology of word embeddings in particular, you can create these association networks, which lead to very simple ratings of possible representations or translations of your idea. So you take a complex abstract idea, you give it a translation, a concrete character, and that can then lead, but you still need to be creative, of course, and it can lead to a campaign that hits all the right notes in order for people to understand the melody and sing along.
And this is exactly why we think that this session is so vital in the current circumstances that we are having right now, because on the next slide, there are some couple of lessons that we learned as a business, as Volkswagen, with probably one of the most strict and rigid companies you can imagine. Thanks to this approach, we are extremely fast to the market. With this customer experience and digital customer experience that we provided in the pandemic very beginning, it was thanks to this initiative. Also, we built the very much resonating and the adequate narrative to the brand, thanks to understanding of the concepts and associations behind. The next slide is also showing you that sometimes, especially sitting alone now in the home office, you tend to think that you might be the smartest person in the room because the room is basically filled only with you. But with this technology, you can also consult and confront your thinking with basically the general population, if you will, which brings, end of the day, the success for your team, for your brand and for your business, even in the circumstances like Dieselgate or pandemic right now.
Quite right. So indeed, looking at the current situation with the new normal, it is a new association normal. There are new things now that we consider to be responsible, trustworthy, etc. And I think it's going to be quite exciting to look in the current climate at what people associate with the most relevant things out there right now, including the coronavirus and things to mitigate it and things to sell products and brands again. But we believe that technology, as you've just seen, is able to show you a direction forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Seth, back to you.
All right, we have a question that was entered in the Q&A. I will read it to you. It's from Robin Chalice. She says, thanks, Jonathan and Michael. I'm wondering on what basis do you associate the billions of words, WordNet, dictionary, thesaurus, and how do you define and detect an associative link?
Yeah. So thank you for that question. So you can see icon representation of some of the data sources here. You can see that we include scrapes of basically the World Wide Web. So as much as we can get from blogs, mass media, social media, Wikipedia, influencers, movie transcripts, music transcripts, TV captions, basically as much as we can get. Why? Because the predictive power of predicting for an individual what their associations would be is higher the more data you give the system to learn. A culture is based on the co-occurrence of things. So as I indicated with Justin Bieber and the Nobel Prize winner here, Albert Einstein, they appear in a context of these words, and the more the machine can learn the typical context of this word, Albert Einstein, the better it can also predict for an individual what they will think if they're presented with the word Albert Einstein. So it's using as much data from that consumers consume and produce for a certain geographical location in a certain language. But underlying it is this technology of word embedding, which is based on the co-occurrence of words in a certain context to predict what the brain will find it most easy to think of when it sees, for example, a word like Albert Einstein.
All right. And we had another question from Peter Dorrington, who complimented you. Super interesting presentation. He has a quick question for Michael. How do you balance an overall brand message with different personae? For example, some customers value competence and value, others value empathy, safety more.
Right. Thank you, Peter, for this for the question. And of course, kudos to your presentation as well. Well, it's how we communicate to consumers currently, which is not anymore the conventional way of thinking about 30 seconds TV commercial. We are buying 90% of the communication currently, we are buying through the programmatic. Programmatic, we feed in with first or zero-party data, first-party data, second and third-party data. Today, we understand much more, not only from this data, not only about the DCJ, so the digital customer journey that consumer took with us until the transaction, where we can already make some, of course, conclusions based on the transaction level, financing, extra warranty that was bought or not, and service package. We can already conclude whether these guys are more focused on safety or not. And with this data like of massive amount of different dimensional data, we buy media programmatically. So we are hyper targeting, again, based on zero through third-party data, we are hyper-targeting our messages in our digital world currently today. Even we are using the dialect in some areas, geographically speaking to people in the areas that I don't even understand. I don't know what the Facebook post says because I don't understand this dialect. So we are even on this kind of level of adequacy of the message to the persona that we understand as much as possible with the data.